Have you ever walked into a place where your money, your hard work, your very name should mean respect only to be treated as if you didn't belong? That's what happened to Jonathan King, a 46-year-old black CEO who walked into his own bank on Fifth Avenue. Instead of a greeting, he was denied service, humiliated in front of strangers, and told to step aside. 7 minutes later, the entire branch staff was gone and a protocol that would change the nation was born. But here's the real question. What would you have done in his shoes? Would you have swallowed the insult quietly, just to move on with your day? Or would you have stood tall, risking everything, to remind the world that dignity is not negotiable? Imagine being judged not by your worth, but by your skin, in a place that should safeguard your future. What choice would you have made? Stay with us as we uncover a story of humiliation turned into hope, and power used not for revenge, but for reform. If this story moves you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's begin. The words came sharp, like glass breaking in the middle of a crowded room. You think someone like you has $1 million just sitting in an account here. Prove it or get out. Karen Whitmore's voice was firm, clipped, and loud enough to ricochet off the polished marble walls of Atlas Bank's downtown Manhattan branch. Every head in the lobby turned. The air shifted. It wasn't just a question she had thrown, it was a judgment. At the counter stood a man in a plain white t-shirt, worn jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days. His shoulders were broad but relaxed. His jaw didn't tighten. His eyes didn't narrow. Jonathan King simply stood still, his driver's license and his bank card resting quietly in the palm of his hand. The lobby froze in that awkward stillness that comes when people sense trouble brewing, but no one dares to intervene. A woman in line pulled her purse closer. A young man near the plants whispered. Did she really just say that Jonathan didn't answer right away? He let the silence hang, almost as if he wanted everyone in that room to feel the weight of it. His face betrayed no anger, no rise of emotion, only a calm steadiness that came not from indifference, but from discipline. Inside, though, something moved. A small, familiar fire flickered in the quiet corners of his memory. He had been here before. Not this exact lobby on Fifth Avenue, with its high ceilings and brass light fixtures, but in this exact position questioned, doubted, dismissed because of how he looked. The time on the branch clock read 10:02 a.m. In just 7 minutes, every employee behind that counter, Karen Whitmore, branch manager, Brian O'Connor, the teller with the smirk, Melissa Carter, the one already inching toward the card drawer would lose their jobs. But none of them knew it yet. And none of the customers standing in that grand Manhattan lobby had any clue that the man they were watching, the man being humiliated in front of them, was not a struggling stranger, not a scammer, not someone out of place. He was Jonathan King, Chief Executive Officer of Atlas Financial Group, the parent company of the very bank they were standing in, net worth over $14 billion and owner of this branch, this building, the chairs they sat in, the desk Karen leaned against. And right now, he looked like just another black man being told he didn't belong. Jonathan finally spoke. His voice was measured, low, calm enough to make the tension seem louder. "I'm here to make a withdrawal," he said, sliding the card a little closer across the counter. "A wire transfer. $1 million. The quiet in the room deepened. Even the air seemed to pause. Karen raised an eyebrow, "A million," she repeated. The edge of her mouth curled into a smirk that carried more cruelty than amusement. In that outfit, the words weren't just about money. They were about class, about color, about assumption. They hung in the air, poisonous. From the corner, Brian O'Connor let out a short laugh through the intercom speaker. "Sir, we'll need to re-verify your ID. You'd be surprised how many scammers come in dressed like that. We've had people try before." Jonathan's heart didn't quicken. His hand didn't shake. He had learned a long time ago that anger gave them what they wanted, a reason to escalate, a reason to dismiss. "My ID is valid," he replied evenly. "So is my account." Brian didn't even glance at his monitor. He leaned back, smug. "Then you won't mind providing additional proof of funds? Maybe change your story while you're at it." A ripple of quiet laughter drifted from the back of the line. Jonathan stood still, but inside, the flame grew. Melissa Carter, a teller barely in her late 20s, suddenly leaned forward. Without asking, she snatched Jonathan's bank card off the counter. She slid it into her drawer with a loud click and turned the key. "This card looks suspicious," she said sharply. "Honestly, you probably stole it. You need to leave." The words landed heavy, sharp as a slap. Gasps broke out in the lobby. A woman clutched her child closer. A man near the door muttered, "Did she really just say that?" From the far right of the lobby, a phone lifted into the air. Sophia Lane, a young marketing consultant waiting to deposit her check, had seen enough. She pressed record, her voice loud and clear. "This is racism at Atlas Bank," she declared, "and it's going online." Several heads swiveled toward her. One man pulled out his own phone. Jonathan didn't flinch. He turned his head slightly. Eyes scanning the room, Karen, arms folded like a queen on a throne. Brian, leaning back with his smirk. Melissa, guarding the drawer like it contained state secrets. And then he looked back at the people, the customers now shifting uncomfortably, whispering to one another. "You're ruining Atlas," he said quietly. His words weren't shouted, but they carried weight. "This isn't about me. It's about you." Flashback. Jonathan was 15, standing in a small branch office in Newark with his grandmother's savings bond in his hand. He wore a hoodie too big for his frame. His voice cracked when he said he wanted to cash it in. The teller had stared at him with suspicion, called for the manager. They told him they couldn't process it unless his grandmother came in herself, even though her name and signature were right there. The humiliation had burned deep. His grandmother had told him that day, as they walked home in silence, "Never let anyone decide your worth by the way you look." It was a seed planted, a fire that never went out. Back in Manhattan, in the gleaming branch of the very institution he now owned, Jonathan stood calm, though every nerve in his body screamed memory. Karen pressed a button under the counter escalation protocol. Though she had no evidence, she turned to Brian. "Call it in if he doesn't leave." Brian's voice cut across the lobby again, booming through the intercom, final warning. "Sir, leave now, or we escalate to law enforcement." Jonathan didn't move. Instead, he pulled out his phone, not to record, but to dial. When his assistant Lena answered, her voice was steady. "We're live, Jonathan, monitoring everything. Say the word." He didn't. Not yet. The fire inside was still contained, but it was growing. The seconds ticked on the wall clock. The marble floor gleamed. Customers shifted, uneasy, sensing history was unfolding, though none of them knew how much. In less than 7 minutes, everything in that branch would change, and every person in that room would walk out knowing they had seen justice not whispered about in policy, not promised in press releases, but delivered in real time. Jonathan King didn't come to this branch by accident. 2 weeks earlier, an anonymous email had landed in his executive inbox. The subject line was plain. "You should see how they treat us." The message was short, raw, and written by someone clearly hurt. "I've banked at Atlas for 10 years, but at the downtown branch they size you up before they serve you. If you don't look rich or white, they stall. They question, they humiliate. I thought you should know." Jonathan had read those words 3 times. He didn't forward the email to compliance. He didn't tell his communications team. He closed his office door, stared out at the Manhattan skyline, and whispered to himself, "If it's true, I'll see it with my own eyes." That was why he was standing here now, dressed down in jeans and sneakers, carrying nothing but his card and ID, no entourage, no assistant, no driver, just a man, appearing as any other customer. But the moment Karen Whitmore had raised her voice, Jonathan knew. The email wasn't just a complaint, it was a warning, and the rot went deeper than policy manuals or training sessions. He shifted slightly, leaning one hand on the cool marble counter. "Manager Whitmore," he said quietly, reading her name from the brass plate pinned to her blazer. "Tell me what makes a customer worthy of service in this branch." Karen stiffened. Her cheeks flushed red, though her eyes hardened. "We have protocols, sir. Suspicious behavior, unusual requests, mismatched appearance and account size. We're trained to flag inconsistencies." "Mismatched appearance," Jonathan repeated, tasting the words. "And what exactly about my appearance is mismatched?" Karen didn't answer. Her silence said enough. Across the room, a young teller shifted nervously at her desk. Her nameplate read Naomi Brooks. She had been at Atlas less than a year. She had seen this scene before, not with a CEO, but with an immigrant father trying to cash his paycheck, with a young woman in scrubs trying to deposit tips. Naomi's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to stand up, but Karen's eyes had already cut across the lobby, sharp as knives, warning her to stay quiet. Still, her fingers tapped nervously against her keyboard, the sound echoing like small footsteps of conscience. Jonathan's mind wandered again, uninvited. He remembered standing outside a bank in Newark at 18, watching his mother's face crumble when her loan application was denied for the 3rd time. She had worked double shifts as a nurse, kept spotless credit, saved every extra dollar. Yet the manager told her she lacked sufficient profile. She had walked out, holding Jonathan's hand tightly, whispering, "One day, you'll change this system. Promise me." He had promised, and now, here he was decades later, in a building with his name on the deed being told he didn't belong. The irony wasn't lost on him. It cut deeper than the insult itself. Brian O'Connor leaned forward, his voice dripping with condescension. "Sir, if you can't produce proof of funds right now, we're done. People are waiting. You're wasting our time." Jonathan's eyes met Brian's. For a flicker of a second, Brian felt something he couldn't quite name. Authority, calm power, a depth that didn't fit the clothes. But the arrogance rushed back, covering the unease. "Get him out." "Karen," Brian urged, Melissa Carter crossed her arms. "I say we call security." Jonathan stayed silent. Inside, he was weighing every move. He could reveal himself now, drop the mask, stop the humiliation, but he remembered the anonymous email, the plea behind it. If he ended it too soon, their true faces would remain hidden, their behavior excused as a misunderstanding. So, he waited. On the far end of the lobby, Sophia Lane kept her phone raised, recording steadily. She knew this footage would matter. She also knew the risk. Karen had a reputation sharp-tongued, vindictive, quick to retaliate, but Sophia had been here before, too. 2 years earlier, her father had been denied a cashier's check because the amount seemed unusual. She had fought, escalated, begged until finally a regional manager approved it. The humiliation had left scars. Now she whispered into her phone's mic, "This is happening again. Watch closely." At that exact moment, the door opened and a man walked in, tall, wearing a gray jacket, carrying a messenger bag. David Ramirez, freelance journalist, was here to meet a source at the coffee shop across the street. But the tension in the lobby was palpable, electric. He paused, scanned the scene, saw Sophia filming, saw the man at the counter standing calm against 3 hostile employees. His instincts flared. Without hesitation, he pulled out his phone and opened a live stream app, Atlas Bank, downtown Manhattan. Possible discrimination in progress. He typed as the title. With a swipe, the video went live. Viewers trickled in, then hundreds, then thousands. Jonathan remained composed, but he could feel the energy shifting. Phones were out. Eyes were on him. Somewhere in the back of the branch, Naomi Brooks's heart pounded. She wanted to intervene, but fear chained her in place. Jonathan breathed slowly, evenly. He had learned long ago that dignity wasn't about silence, nor about rage, it was about control. And right now, he was in control. Karen Whitmore leaned closer, her voice colder than before. "Sir, last warning. Leave this branch. If you refuse, we'll involve law enforcement." Jonathan met her gaze. His voice was almost a whisper, but it carried through the room. "You've already involved the law," he said. "Not the police. A higher law, the law of human dignity." The words struck like a quiet hammer, leaving an echo. Several customers shifted. Someone muttered, "He's right." Karen's face tightened. She turned away as if dismissing him entirely. Jonathan's phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from his assistant, footage going viral already. "Do you want me to prepare a statement?" He didn't answer. Not yet. This had to play out. 7 minutes. That was all it would take. 7 minutes to turn humiliation into a reckoning. The lobby of Atlas Bank pulsed with unease. Marble floors reflected the light from the chandeliers above, but no shine could hide the ugliness spreading across the counter. Karen Whitmore stood with her arms folded, chin high, as if the whole building belonged to her. Brian O'Connor leaned on his elbows, his smirk deepening with every second. Melissa Carter tapped her manicured nails against the locked drawer where Jonathan's bank card now sat. Each click a small act of control. And in front of them, Jonathan King remained still, calm on the outside, calculating on the inside. "Sir," Karen began, her tone clipped and rehearsed, "we've given you multiple chances. You're clearly unwilling or unable to provide sufficient proof. This conversation is over." She made a subtle motion to Melissa, who picked up the phone on her desk. The hush in the room grew louder. Customers glanced at each other, eyebrows raised. Nobody moved, but everyone could feel the moment sharpening. Jonathan let his gaze sweep across the room. He saw the fear in Naomi Brooks' eyes, the determination in Sophia Lane's steady camera hand, the curiosity on the faces of strangers, and somewhere behind them, David Ramirez's live stream carried the scene into thousands of homes. Inside, Jonathan wrestled with himself. He could end it all with one sentence. He could drop his name, his title, his power, but that would rob the world of seeing what these employees did when they believed their victim was powerless. So he stayed quiet. Brian broke the silence with a chuckle. Maybe he thinks keeping calm makes him look legit. Hate to break it to you, buddy, but we've seen this act before. People like you walk in here, think you can trick us with fake cards, fake IDs. Not today. Jonathan tilted his head slightly. His voice, when it came, was soft. People like me. The phrase settled in the air like a heavy stone. Brian blinked but didn't back down. Yeah, people who don't fit, who don't belong. The customers stirred. One woman whispered, "That's not right." A man near the exit muttered, "He didn't even check the system." Still, Karen stood firm. "Brian, call it in," she ordered. Melissa grinned as she punched numbers on the phone. Naomi's chair squeaked as she rose. "Manager Whitmore," she said, her voice unsteady. "I think you should at least check the account. I've seen his name before. I'm almost certain of it." Karen's eyes snapped to her, sharp enough to cut. "Sit down. Brooks, you're out of line, but ma'am now." The word cracked like a whip. Naomi sank back into her chair, cheeks burning, shame and frustration warring inside her. Jonathan caught her eye for the briefest moment, a look that said, "I see you. Hold on." Melissa's voice rang out as she spoke into the receiver. "Security. We need assistance at the front desk. Possible fraudulent activity." The words sliced through the air, louder than they needed to be. She wanted everyone to hear them, wanted Jonathan branded before anyone even arrived. Jonathan's heart gave a single, quiet thud. He breathed through it. He had learned not to fight every insult. Some needed to echo before they could be shattered. He thought of his daughter, Maya, who once asked him why the world treated people differently based on the color of their skin. He had promised her that one day he'd show her dignity was stronger than hate. Maybe today was that day. David Ramirez zoomed in on Jonathan's face as he streamed. He whispered into his mic for his viewers. "Notice how calm he is. They've taken his card, they're calling security, and he hasn't raised his voice once." The comments scrolled quickly, classic discrimination. "Don't let them push you out. Brother, who is this man? He looks important." And then, "Wait, I think that's Jonathan King. Is it?" The stream began to surge. Sophia lowered her phone for a second, looking Jonathan in the eye. "Do you want me to keep filming?" she asked softly. Jonathan gave a single nod. Karen snapped, "Ma'am, you need to put that phone away. Bank policy forbids recording inside the branch." Sophia didn't flinch. "Bank policy doesn't override human rights," she said, raising the phone higher. Gasps rippled across the lobby. Karen's face flushed crimson. Jonathan finally spoke again, his words directed at the 3 employees who had boxed him in. "You're making a mistake," he said calmly. Brian laughed. "Oh, sure. What are you gonna do, Sue, us?" Melissa smirked. "Better hope security goes easy on you." Karen folded her arms tighter. "You've wasted enough of our time. We run a professional institution here." Jonathan's eyes darkened just slightly. "Professional," he repeated. Interesting choice of word. For the first time, his composure cracked not into anger, but into something sharper, authority. He straightened his shoulders, and the room seemed to tilt toward him. "I've spent my life building institutions," he said slowly. "I know what professionalism looks like, and I know what prejudice looks like. Do you?" Karen opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. Something about the way he spoke unsettled her, though she couldn't name why. Brian rolled his eyes. "Save the speeches, pal. You're done here." Jonathan's lips curved into the faintest smile. "No," he said. "You are." The tension was a storm cloud now, heavy and humming. The customers were no longer just observers, they were witnesses, restless, ready to take sides. Naomi's fingers trembled over her keyboard. She wanted to run the account search, to prove what she suspected. But fear chained her. Jonathan gave her one last look, steady and reassuring. Then he turned back to Karen. "I'll give you one chance," he said. "Check the account. Do your job." Karen's jaw set. "We don't take orders from people trying to scam us." Jonathan's smile faded. The storm inside him was ready. The branch doors opened. 2 uniformed security guards stepped in, scanning the room. Melissa pointed straight at Jonathan. "That's him," she said quickly. "Fraudulent account, refusing to leave." The guards looked uncertain. Jonathan stood tall, calm, eyes locked on theirs. For a moment, neither moved. They could feel something in him that didn't match the picture Melissa had painted. "Sir," one guard said carefully, "what exactly is going on here?" Jonathan inhaled slowly, exhaled evenly. "You're about to find out," he said. And with that, the clock struck 10:05. 2 minutes had passed. 5 remained. The guards stood in the doorway, their black uniforms catching the reflection of the chandelier light. Their eyes shifted from Jonathan to Melissa, then to Karen. Melissa's hand was still wrapped around the phone receiver. "That's him," she repeated, her voice sharp with certainty. "Fraudulent card, refusing to comply. He's wasting everyone's time." One of the guards, a tall man with a shaved head, hesitated. His name tag read Hughes. He had been here long enough to know when something smelled wrong. The man standing at the counter didn't look like a scammer. He looked like someone used to being in control, even when surrounded. Jonathan kept his voice level. "Before you decide anything," he said, "ask them if they've checked my account." Hughes glanced at Karen. "Did you?" Karen's lips tightened. "I don't need to. It's obvious." The second guard, younger and less sure of himself, shifted uncomfortably. "Obvious how? Look at him," Karen said flatly. "You think someone dressed like that walks in asking for $1 million wire? Come on." The words landed heavy, and a murmur swept the lobby. Customers shook their heads. One older gentleman whispered, "That's not how banking works. You check the account." Naomi Brooks gripped the edge of her desk so tightly her knuckles turned white. She could almost feel the database screen in front of her, ready to reveal the truth with just a few keystrokes. But Karen's stare burned into her, an unspoken threat. Don't. Sophia Lane, still filming, raised her voice from the line of customers. You're humiliating this man in public, without proof, without even checking his information. Karen snapped her head toward her. Ma'am, if you keep recording, I'll have you escorted out. Sophia didn't lower her phone. Her hand was steady, her tone firm. If you put me out, you put out the truth. This is all being documented. The live stream comments on David Ramirez's feed surged. Keep filming, expose them. This is classic profiling. Thousands of viewers were piling in by the second. David himself narrated softly into his mic, his eyes darting between Jonathan and the staff. Viewers, you're watching this live. A black man is being accused of fraud without a single check of the system. The staff has locked away his card. Security has been called. You tell me if this looks fair. The chat exploded in response. Jonathan remained steady. His heart rate ticked higher, but his breathing stayed slow. He looked at Sophia, then at David, acknowledging them without words. Allies, strangers willing to risk something for the truth. He turned back to Karen. One more time. Run the account. Karen's jaw set hard. I don't take orders from you. Her words trembled faintly. Authority wasn't as solid when cracks began to show. Brian leaned back, folding his arms. Boss, you're wasting your breath. These people don't have what they claim, just another wannabe. Jonathan tilted his head, studying Brian. Interesting word. Wannabe? Tell me, what do you think I want to be? Brian smirked. Rich. Jonathan almost smiled. Almost. Rich is the smallest thing I've ever wanted, he said quietly. The room stilled. His words carried a weight no one expected. Naomi's chest rose and fell faster. She couldn't take it anymore. She stood again, this time louder. Manager Whitmore, this isn't right. At least let me check. Karen's head whipped around. Brooks, sit down before I terminate you myself. Naomi froze, her hands trembling. She looked at Jonathan again. In his calm eyes, she saw not just patience, but something more permission. David's live stream caught her expression, and the comments erupted. That teller knows the truth. Let her check it. Protect Naomi. Sophia added from the crowd, she's right. Let her check. What are you afraid of? The question echoed. What are you afraid of? Karen's face flushed deeper, but she didn't answer. The younger guard shifted again. Maybe she should check, just to be sure. Karen glared at him. We don't need to second-guess protocol. Jonathan finally stepped forward, his presence filling the space without force. Your protocol, he said softly, is nothing more than prejudice wrapped in procedure. You know it. They know it. His words pointed outward, and the customers stirred. People who had been silent began murmuring. A woman whispered, I was treated like that last month. Another nodded. Me too. The atmosphere shifted. What began as isolated humiliation was becoming collective recognition. David Ramirez panned his camera across the lobby. Listen to that, he whispered to his viewers. This is no longer one man's fight. This is everyone's story. The comments flew. I had the same thing happen at a bank in Chicago. This happens everywhere. Don't let them silence him. The live stream count crossed 50,000. Karen tried to regain control. Enough of this circus, she snapped. Security, remove him. Hughes shook his head slowly. Not until someone checks the account. Karen's mouth fell open, shocked at the defiance. Jonathan's calm voice filled the pause. Good choice. Melissa slammed the phone receiver down, frustrated. This is ridiculous. He's stalling. This is what scammers do. Jonathan looked at her steadily. If I were a scammer, you would have caught me in 60 seconds. But you haven't, because you're not interested in truth, only in power. The sentence sliced through her, sharper than anything she expected. She faltered, looking away. Naomi's hand hovered over her keyboard. She whispered to herself, barely audible, do the right thing. Her fingers moved before fear could stop her. She typed Jonathan's name. The system processed, the screen blinked, and then rows of data filled the monitor. Naomi gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. Balance $482,000. Multiple corporate accounts. Executive tier flagged. She turned pale. Karen barked. What are you doing? Naomi's voice trembled, but she forced it out. He's who he says he is. The lobby erupted with gasps. Sophia's camera caught it. David's live stream captioned it. The crowd buzzed like a hive awakened. Karen's face drained of color. Brian's smirk cracked. Melissa's lips parted in shock. Jonathan simply nodded. He hadn't said his name yet. He hadn't revealed his title, but the truth had begun to crack the ceiling, and the world, thanks to a live stream and a recording, was watching every second. Jonathan looked at Naomi. Thank you, he said quietly. She swallowed hard, tears threatening. I couldn't stay silent. Her courage lit a spark across the room. The silence of bystanders had broken. Sophia lowered her phone just enough to speak. Now, what do you have to say? Manager Whitmore Karen's mouth opened, but no words came. Jonathan's phone buzzed again in his pocket. His assistant's text glowed, Sir, the board is already seeing the live stream. He didn't answer, not yet. He still had moves to make. The clock ticked to 10:06. Only 4 minutes had passed. 3 remained. The storm was almost here. The hum of voices in the marble lobby was no longer just whispers. It was a current, alive, pulsing with disbelief and recognition. Naomi Brooks had done it. She had pulled up the account, and what she found had cut through the charade like sunlight through storm clouds. Karen Whitmore's face stiffened, but her authority cracked at the edges. She tried to recover, leaning hard on her voice. Don't be fooled, she snapped. That data could be manipulated. You know how easy it is to fake things on these systems. Naomi shook her head, still pale from what she had seen. No, ma'am, it's not fake. The account is. It's massive. Multiple corporate divisions, executive tier access. His credentials are real. Sophia Lane swung her camera phone toward Naomi. Say it again, she urged, her voice trembling with adrenaline. Say it on record. Naomi's voice was louder this time, steadier. He's not a fraud. He's a client, a top-tier client. The crowd erupted. A murmur grew into a wave. I knew it. They didn't even check. This is disgraceful. David Ramirez's live stream lit up. The comments poured like fire. Told you. They got caught. This is about to explode. Jonathan King stood motionless, letting the noise swirl around him, calm, controlled. He had carried himself through decades of boardrooms, congressional hearings, shareholder showdowns. This was no different except here. The stakes weren't billions in stock or quarterly returns. Here, the stakes were dignity. He finally spoke, voice low but carrying to every corner. You had the chance to do your job. You chose to judge instead. Karen's jaw clenched. We followed protocol. Jonathan tilted his head. Protocol that ignores facts. Protocol that humiliates paying customers. That's not protocol. That's prejudice in a suit and tie. Gasps flickered across the lobby. A man in the back clapped once, sharp and loud. Brian O'Connor shifted uncomfortably, his smirk faltering for the first time. Look, maybe we jumped too fast. We just have to be careful. Right? It's not personal. Jonathan's eyes locked on him. When you say it's not personal, what you mean is you don't want accountability. But this was personal. Every word, every look, every assumption it was directed at me. Brian dropped his gaze. Melissa Carter, however, doubled down. You can't just walk in here and expect royal treatment. We're trying to protect this bank from scams. If you really belong, then prove it. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. Prove it. The account itself isn't proof enough. Melissa hesitated, her confidence thinning. But Karen jumped in, desperate to hold her ground. Enough. We're wasting time. Guards, remove him. The guards didn't move. Hughes, the older one, crossed his arms. Not until I know exactly who we're dealing with. Jonathan's eyes softened slightly. It was time. He reached into his pocket. Not hurried, not dramatic, just deliberate. He pulled out a sleek black wallet, worn around the edges from years of travel. From it, he slid a metal card engraved with a name. He placed it gently on the counter. The name gleamed under the light. Jonathan King. Several customers gasped. One whispered, "Wait, I've heard that name." David zoomed in with his camera, whispering into his mic, "Viewers, you're seeing this. Jonathan King, CEO of Atlas Financial Group, the man who owns this bank." The live stream erupted, comments flooding so fast they blurred. No way. Holy hell, they messed with the CEO. This is history. Karen's lips parted, disbelief washing over her face. You're saying your Jonathan cut her off." His tone calm but heavy. "I'm not saying, I am. And you just humiliated the man who signs your paychecks." The silence that followed was deafening. Melissa's hand slipped off the counter. Brian took a step back. Karen's face drained of color. Jonathan picked up the card again, sliding it back into his wallet with the same ease as before. "I wanted to believe that email was an exaggeration," he said. "I wanted to believe my people were better. But today, you've proven the rot is real." The room buzzed, outrage mixing with awe. A woman muttered, "He owns the bank, and they treated him like that." Sophia whispered, "This is the moment." She raised her phone higher. "Say it for the world." Jonathan looked straight into her lens. His eyes didn't burn with anger, they burned with truth. "My name is Jonathan King. I'm the CEO of Atlas Financial Group, and this branch just profiled me in front of every single one of you." The words hit like thunder. The crowd gasped. The live stream spiked into 6 figures. Comments screamed across the screen, "CEO confirmed. They're finished. Accountability time." Karen stumbled, searching for words. I didn't know." Jonathan's voice sharpened. "That's the point. You didn't want to know. You didn't check. You judged." Melissa tried to interject. "We were just just what Jonathan's voice was still calm, but now it carried the weight of command. Protecting the bank or protecting your bias? Melissa froze. Brian's voice cracked as he tried to salvage something. Maybe if you'd come in dressed differently, the crowd erupted in outrage. That's racist, someone shouted. Doesn't matter how he's dressed. Jonathan turned slightly toward the customers. You hear it? The truth is in their own words. Naomi Brooks stood again, her voice stronger now. Sir, I'm sorry. This isn't what Atlas should be. Jonathan looked at her, his tone softening. You did the right thing, Naomi. That matters. Her eyes glistened. Sophia caught it all on video, whispering, The internet needs to see this courage, too. Jonathan turned back to Karen. Brian and Melissa. Do you know what the saddest part is? I didn't come here as your CEO. I came here as a customer. I wanted to see with my own eyes if the complaints were true. And you didn't disappoint. The words cut deeper than anger. They carried disappointment, the kind that wounds more than rage. Karen's hands trembled on the counter. Please, Mr. King, give us another chance. Jonathan held up a hand, silencing her. Your chance ended the moment you judged me, and the world is watching. David Ramirez spoke softly into his live stream. There it is, the reveal. This man is the CEO, and in just minutes, he's about to decide the fate of this branch. The comments went wild. Terminate them now. This is justice unfolding. Don't let them off easy. Jonathan exhaled slowly. The fire inside him was steady now, not raging but controlled. He knew what came next. The clock read 10:07 a.m. 5 minutes gone. 2 remained. The reckoning was about to begin. The marble lobby had gone from smug silence to trembling disbelief. The reveal was still hanging in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Jonathan King, CEO of Atlas Financial Group, the man who oversaw billions in assets, had just been profiled, insulted, and denied service in his own branch. Karen Whitmore clutched the counter for balance. Her eyes darted toward the doors, toward the guards, toward the cameras raised all around. She looked like a woman scrambling for exits in a room with none. Jonathan glanced at his watch. The second hand ticked forward, deliberate, steady. 6 minutes had passed. 1 minute remained. Ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan's voice carried across the lobby, calm yet commanding. I came here to see if the complaints about this branch were true. I didn't expect you to give me the answer so quickly. The crowd leaned closer. Even the guards stilled. David Ramirez whispered into his mic. You're watching this live, tens of thousands of you. The CEO is about to make a decision in real time. His phone screen lit with exploding comments. Fire them all. This is history. No mercy. Sophia Lane kept her camera steady, her own heart pounding. She could feel that this was no longer just a confrontation. This was judgment. Jonathan tapped his phone screen once, then held it up for all to see. This call will not be private, he said, because what was done in public must be answered in public. He pressed a button. The speaker clicked. A clear voice filled the air. This is Charles Bennett. Gasps rippled across the lobby. Everyone knew the name. Chairman of Atlas Financial Group. Jonathan's right hand in the empire. Charles, Jonathan said, his tone even. You're live on speaker. You're also live on tens of thousands of phones across the country. Do you hear me clearly? Yes. Sir? A pause. What happened? Jonathan's gaze swept the branch, lingering on Karen, Brian, and Melissa. I came to the Fifth Avenue branch this morning. As a customer, I was denied service, accused of fraud, my card confiscated, security called, all without a single system check. Charles's voice hardened. Is this true? Jonathan didn't answer. He turned slightly, gesturing to Naomi. Tell him. Naomi swallowed, her voice trembling but strong. Yes, sir. I saw it all. They never checked. They called him a fraud. Manager Whitmore ordered it. Sophia swung her phone, capturing Naomi's courage. The comments poured in. Hero, protect Naomi. Jonathan let the silence hang for a breath before continuing. Charles, under our accountability policy, what is the consequence of violating a client's dignity, ignoring protocol, and engaging in discriminatory conduct? Charles didn't hesitate. Immediate termination. Karen's knees buckled. Wait, please. Jonathan raised a hand, silencing her. His calm had become steel. Then let it be done. Effective immediately. Karen Whitmore, branch manager, Brian O'Connor, teller, Melissa Carter, teller, you are terminated. The words dropped like stones into water. The crowd gasped. Some even clapped. Brian's face drained of color. You can't do that. Jonathan's gaze was sharp. I just did. Melissa burst out. I have a family. Jonathan's voice softened, but it didn't bend. And how many families walked out of this bank humiliated because of you? Choices have consequences. Karen reached across the counter. Desperate. Mr. King, please. I've been here 20 years. 20 years of unchecked bias. Jonathan said quietly. That ends today. David's live stream chat exploded. Fired on the spot. Accountability in real time. This is justice, Sophia whispered to herself. I can't believe I'm watching this happen live. The guards didn't move to protect the staff. Instead, Hughes nodded, as if the decision had restored a balance he had been waiting for. Jonathan looked to Naomi. Naomi Brooks, you did the right thing today. That will not be forgotten. Effective immediately. You're promoted to acting branch supervisor until further notice. Naomi's hands flew to her mouth. Sir, I don't know what to say. Say nothing, Jonathan said gently. Just keep doing what's right. The crowd applauded, a genuine surge of warmth breaking through the tension. Jonathan turned back to the phone. Charles, prepare a full audit of this branch. Every case, every complaint. I want transparency by the end of the week, and issue a public statement by noon. Zero tolerance for discrimination, starting with today's action. Yes, sir, Charles replied firmly. Jonathan ended the call. The branch was silent again, but it wasn't the silence of intimidation anymore. It was the silence of history being made. Jonathan adjusted his cuffs, then looked directly into Sophia's phone. His voice was calm, but it carried a gravity that pinned the room. To anyone watching, he said, know this prejudice thrives in silence. But silence ends when we choose to speak, to act, to hold accountable. Today, this branch learned that no one is above respect and no one is beneath it. The comments erupted like fireworks. Say it louder. CEO of the year. This is the standard. Karen collapsed into her chair, her authority shattered. Brian stared at the floor, silent for the first time. Melissa wiped tears angrily from her face. Jonathan gave them one last look, not of vengeance, but of finality. Your employment here ends today. Security will escort you out. You may collect your belongings under supervision. He turned, not waiting for their response. Naomi whispered to herself, "This is unreal." Sophia lowered her phone, shaken. "No, it's real, and it's going to change everything." David Ramirez spoke to his viewers. "Ladies and gentlemen, you just witnessed a live reckoning. 7 minutes from humiliation to justice. The clip will be everywhere in minutes. The question is, will it stop here, or will it spark something bigger?" His chat scrolled like a flood. "This will change the industry. Banks everywhere are on notice. Jonathan King just set the bar." Jonathan paused at the doorway. He turned once more to the customers, the staff, the cameras. This is not the end. It's the beginning. Accountability is not about firing people, it's about building something better in their place. Atlas will not tolerate what happened here today. Neither should any institution in this country. With that, he stepped out into the sunlight of Fifth Avenue, leaving the stunned branch behind him. The clock ticked to 10:08 a.m. 7 minutes had passed. History had been written. When Jonathan King stepped onto Fifth Avenue, the autumn air felt different, crisp, electric. Behind him, the glass doors of the Atlas branch closed with a soft thud, sealing in the stunned silence of those who had just been dismissed. But outside, the world was no longer silent. Dozens of pedestrians had gathered, alerted by the commotion, the raised phones, the murmurs spreading like sparks. Some recognized him instantly. Others only pieced it together as the notifications hit their screens. CEO fires entire staff on the spot after discrimination incident caught on livestream. Within minutes, the video Sophia Lane had streamed was picked up by larger accounts. David Ramirez's feed exploded past 200,000 live viewers before cutting off. His phone battery drained from the surge. Screenshots of Naomi's trembling hands, of Karen's pale face, of Jonathan's calm reveal, all were circulating online, stitched into endless loops and captions. Inside a newsroom, barely a mile away, a producer shouted across the floor, "We've got break-in Atlas Bank CEO, discrimination, fired staff live, get it on the ticker, now." Anchors interrupted regular programming. Cable news banners blared, "Atlas CEO humiliated, responds with instant termination." Clips rolled across televisions in bars, offices, and airports. By noon, the video was the lead story in New York. By evening, it was the lead story in the country. Jonathan didn't stop walking. His driver pulled the black sedan to the curb, but Jonathan waved him off. He needed the rhythm of his own footsteps, needed the air. People began approaching, hesitant, respectful. A young man in a delivery uniform caught up to him. "Mr. King?" he asked, almost whispering. Jonathan slowed. "Yes." The man's eyes brimmed. "Thank you for standing up. People like me, we've lived that 100 times, but no one listens when we say it." Jonathan placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "They're listening now. Make sure you speak." The young man nodded, tears slipping free. Meanwhile, in the branch, chaos reigned. Karen sat slumped, her authority gone, her career disintegrated in less than 10 minutes. Brian muttered to himself, pacing, while Melissa dabbed furiously at her eyes, oscillating between anger and despair. Naomi Brooks, still at her desk, trembled as the weight of her promotion sank in. Customers surrounded her with quiet affirmations. One elderly woman squeezed her hand. "You were brave, dear. Don't ever lose that." Outside, Hughes the guard stood like a sentinel, ensuring calm as the terminated staff were prepared to leave. He had seen plenty of incidents in 20 years on the job, but nothing like this. Nothing that shifted the very ground beneath his feet. By mid-afternoon, Atlas Financial Group headquarters was engulfed in reporters. Journalists camped at the entrance, cameras rolling, hungry for statements. Charles Bennett, usually a man of polished reserve, held a press briefing. "This morning," Charles began, "our CEO, Jonathan King, was subjected to discriminatory treatment at one of our own branches. What you've seen is unacceptable. What you've seen is why reform cannot wait. Effective immediately. Atlas is instituting a zero-tolerance policy against bias in all forms, with independent oversight and mandatory audits. Every employee, from teller to executive, will be accountable." The questions flew fast. Will the firing stand? How widespread is this problem? Did the CEO plan this as a test? Charles didn't flinch. The firing stand. The audit begins today. And whether this was a test or not, it revealed the truth we cannot ignore. Jonathan, back in his office overlooking Manhattan, finally sat down. The city stretched before him, shimmering, alive. His phone buzzed relentlessly, calls from investors, texts from allies, invitations from networks. He let them wait. For the first time that day, he allowed himself to feel the weight of it. The humiliation still clung like smoke in his chest. The words they had thrown fraud, scammer, wannabe echoed faintly. He closed his eyes. His father's voice drifted back from decades ago. "Son, when they look at you and see less, you stand taller. When they look at you and call you nothing, you answer with everything you are." Jonathan exhaled. The old man had been right. Across the country, conversations erupted. At a diner in Atlanta, two women argued softly. "He only got respect because he's the CEO." The other shook her head. "No, he got respect because he demanded it. And maybe now, the rest of us will too." At a college campus in Chicago, students gathered around laptops. One asked, "Do you think this will actually change banks?" Another replied, "It has to. If the CEO himself gets profiled, what chance do the rest of us have unless policies change?" The viral moment reached Capitol Hill by evening. Senators issued statements. Advocacy groups amplified the footage. Civil rights leaders called it a turning point. One comment trended above all others, written by an unknown user on Sophia's stream. 7 minutes changed the conversation. How many more until the country changes? At home that night, Jonathan sat with a simple dinner: salmon, roasted vegetables, a glass of water, no champagne, no celebration, just quiet reflection. Naomi called him unexpectedly. Her voice shook. "Sir, I don't know if I deserve this promotion." I was scared. I almost stayed silent. Jonathan leaned back, gazing out at the city lots. Courage isn't about never feeling fear, Naomi. It's about doing the right thing even when you do. That's what you did. Don't forget it. There was silence, then a tearful thank you. In the days that followed, Atlas stock dipped briefly, then soared higher as public trust swelled. Other banks scrambled to announce new bias training and oversight initiatives, terrified of becoming the next headline. Late-night comedians joked, "Imagine getting fired by your boss in front of the entire internet." But beneath the laughter was admiration. For millions of viewers, the story was not just about Jonathan King, the billionaire CEO. It was about every person who had walked into a bank, a store, an office, and felt smaller because of someone else's prejudice. Jonathan had carried their voices in those 7 minutes, and now their voices carried him. By the end of the week, the clip had been viewed over 200 million times across platforms. The phrase 7-minute reckoning trended for days. Signs appeared at protests and rallies, 7 minutes too long. Jonathan stood before his board on Friday, calm as always. "We can't undo what happened," he said, "but we can decide what happens next. Atlas will be the standard, not because we want good press, but because people deserve dignity every time they walk into our doors." The board, moved by his resolve, voted unanimously to fund a new initiative, the King Protocol, a comprehensive accountability system spanning all branches. History was moving, and Jonathan had set it in motion. The boardroom at Atlas headquarters was silent except for the faint hum of the city outside. Sunlight poured through the glass walls, bouncing off polished wood and steel. Around the long table sat directors, legal advisors, and senior executives all waiting. At the head of the table stood Jonathan King. He looked as calm as he had that morning in the branch lobby. But now his calmness carried momentum. A storm turned into purpose. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jonathan began, "the world saw what happened. They saw what Atlas allowed to fester. This isn't just about one branch, one staff, or one CEO. It's about a culture that tolerated disrespect until it reached me. And if it reached me, think about how many it has crushed quietly." No one dared to interrupt. Jonathan continued, his tone measured but piercing. "We cannot hide behind apologies. We cannot release statements that fade in 24 hours. We must build a structure that prevents this from happening again. Not just here, but in every financial institution that claims to serve the public. That's why I'm instituting what we will call the King Protocol." He paused, letting the words settle. Charles Bennett leaned forward. "Outline it for us." Jonathan clicked the remote. The screen behind him lit up with bullet points, bold and clear. "Step 1, Jonathan said, "mandatory anti-bias and dignity training. Not a 2-hour slideshow, a 50-hour certified program developed with civil rights partners and delivered annually. Failure to complete it equals automatic suspension." Several board members scribbled notes. "Step 2, independent oversight. Every branch will have an external ombudsman rotating, anonymous to staff, reporting directly to headquarters. Customers will have direct access to file complaints that cannot be buried by local managers." A murmur spread around the table. This was not cosmetic, this was structural. "Step 3, technology," Jonathan went on. "We will deploy an AI monitoring system trained not just for fraud, but for discriminatory language and patterns. Every recorded interaction, every note, will be reviewed for signs of bias." Gasps rose. Some directors looked uneasy. Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "If that makes anyone here nervous, ask yourself why." He clicked again. "Step 4, accountability tied to pay. Manager and executive bonuses will be linked to diversity and fairness metrics, not just profit. If discrimination rises in a branch, compensation falls. If dignity rises, everyone benefits. Charles Bennett smiled faintly. That will get their attention. Jonathan nodded. And step 5, public transparency. We will publish quarterly reports, complaints filed, outcomes, demographic data. If we claim to be a bank for all, then all deserve to see how we serve them. The room fell silent again, heavy with the weight of what he was proposing. One director finally cleared his throat. Jonathan, these reforms are radical. The industry will resist. Investors may resist. Jonathan folded his hands calmly. Investors have already called me. Do you know what they said? They said, "Thank you, because dignity builds trust, and trust builds value." The old way is not only immoral, it's bad business, another director asked. And if competitors refused to follow, Jonathan's answer was swift. Then let them fall behind. Atlas will lead. The vote was called. Every hand went up, unanimous. The King Protocol was born. News of the decision spread almost instantly. Headlines shifted. Atlas responds with sweeping reforms. The King Protocol, a new standard in banking. The following week, Jonathan addressed employees via live stream. Thousands of tellers, managers, and analysts watched from screens across the nation. Jonathan stood in front of the Atlas logo, his voice steady. What happened at Fifth Avenue was not an isolated incident. It was a mirror. And when a mirror shows us a truth we don't like, we don't smash it, we change what it reflects. That's why we are instituting the King Protocol. Not to punish, but to protect. Not to shame, but to build a culture where every customer, every employee, every person is treated with dignity. He paused, letting the silence speak. I expect resistance. I expect complaints. But I also expect courage, because courage is contagious, and the world is watching us. Let's give them something worth watching. The chat box filled with support. Proud to work here. This is leadership. Finally, change. Meanwhile, Naomi Brooks adjusted to her new role as acting supervisor. The branch was quieter now. Its atmosphere shifted. Customers came in not just to deposit checks, but to thank her for speaking up. One afternoon, a young mother leaned across the counter. "You remind me of my daughter. Thank you for showing her what courage looks like." Naomi smiled, though the weight of her new position pressed heavily. At night, she lay awake replaying the morning of the incident. The moment she almost stayed silent. The moment she chose not to. Her phone buzzed one evening. A message from Jonathan himself. Courage isn't perfect. It's simply choosing what's right. Keep choosing. Tears filled her eyes. She typed back, "I will." Sophia Lane's video became a cultural touchstone. She appeared on morning shows, explaining how an ordinary customer with a smartphone had become part of a moment that changed an industry. David Ramirez, once a struggling freelancer, received offers from major outlets, yet he kept reminding people, "It's not about my video. It's about what it captured truth in real time." Their lives had changed just as the bank had changed. Of course, not everyone celebrated. Opinion pieces emerged, some questioning Jonathan's decisiveness, others claiming he acted too swiftly. "What about due process for employees?" one editorial asked. Jonathan responded in a televised interview, calm as ever. "Due process exists when systems are fair, but when bias is the process, due process means delay, and delay means denial of dignity. I acted quickly because dignity delayed is dignity denied. The phrase spread, dignity delayed is dignity denied. It appeared on posters, in classrooms, even on protest signs in cities across the country. Weeks later, Jonathan sat in his office, reflecting. He thought of his father, of the lessons that shaped him, of the humiliation that morning had brought. But he also thought of Naomi's courage, Sophia's determination, David's lens. He realized something profound. He had fired 3 employees. Yes, but what mattered most was what he had ignited: a movement, a standard, a protocol that might outlive him. By December, other banks began announcing similar initiatives. Some called theirs equity frameworks, others diversity compacts, but everyone knew where it started. The King Protocol had become more than policy. It was a symbol. Jonathan King had turned 7 minutes of humiliation into a legacy of reform, and he wasn't finished yet. The King Protocol had been in place for barely a month, yet its reach was already spreading like a tide that couldn't be held back. What had begun in one marble-floored lobby now spilled into city halls, classrooms, and kitchen table conversations across the country. News outlets replayed the footage daily, framing it not only as a corporate scandal but as a cultural reckoning. Civil rights leaders spoke Jonathan King's words. Dignity delayed is dignity denied at rallies from Detroit to Dallas. Protesters held signs outside banks, restaurants, and even police precincts, echoing the demand for systemic accountability. But the ripple was not only in the streets, it was in the quiet places, too. In a small town outside St. Louis, a retired teacher sat with her granddaughter at the kitchen table. The girl, no more than 10, watched Jonathan's speech on a tablet. "Grandma," she asked softly, "why did they treat him like that?" The old woman sighed, her eyes clouding with memory. "Because sometimes people see the color of your skin before they see your worth." The girl frowned, but he showed them. "Yes," the grandmother said, her voice breaking slightly. "And because he showed them, maybe you won't have to as much." At Columbia University, a panel of law professors gathered for a discussion. One leaned into the microphone. Jonathan King's actions carry legal weight. By instituting the King Protocol, he has set a precedent that corporations cannot just rely on anti-discrimination statements, they must design systems to enforce dignity. Another professor nodded. "We're watching corporate law evolve in real time. Shareholders are demanding not just profit, but fairness metrics. And it started because one CEO was willing to expose his own institution." Meanwhile, Jonathan himself traveled quietly to Washington. Though the visit was not publicized, word leaked quickly he was meeting with congressional leaders to discuss banking oversight. In a closed session, one senator asked him bluntly, "Mr. King, do you believe this is a banking issue or a societal issue?" Jonathan leaned forward, folding his hands. "Senator, it's both. Banks are where people's lives intersect with power. If you're denied dignity at the counter where your paycheck becomes groceries, that denial echoes everywhere. Fixing banking culture means setting a tone for the rest of society." The senator scribbled a note, his expression thoughtful. Naomi Brooks, still finding her footing as acting supervisor, began receiving letters, hundreds of them. Some arrived at the branch, others through email forwarded from corporate. One came from a woman in Texas. "I was in tears watching you speak up. You reminded me of my younger self, afraid to lose a job if I challenged a manager. Thank you for showing courage. You gave me courage." Another, from a high school student in California. "We're studying the King Protocol in my civics class. My teacher said you're proof that ordinary people can change history." Naomi kept the letters in a shoebox under her bed. On the hardest days, she pulled them out and read until her hands stopped shaking. Sophia Lane, once just a customer with a smartphone, found herself invited to conferences about citizen journalism. She told audiences, "I didn't set out to change the world. I just refused to put my phone down. Sometimes justice needs a witness." David Ramirez, now writing for a national outlet, reflected in one column. "We all saw Jonathan King fire 3 people. But what really happened that day was this: the country fired its silence." Not everyone welcomed the change. In Chicago, a group of financial executives grumbled over cigars. "This King Protocol will strangle us," one said. "We're here to make money, not to be social workers." Another scoffed. "It's a PR stunt. Give it 6 months. It'll fade." But the numbers told a different story. Customer satisfaction at Atlas had risen 22% since the reforms began. Complaints were down. New accounts were up. Investors, far from fleeing, were flocking. Jonathan read those figures in a quiet moment late one night. He closed the report, leaned back, and whispered to himself, "Trust is the best investment." In the Bronx, a community center hosted a town hall. Residents gathered to share their stories of being denied loans, treated with suspicion, dismissed because of how they looked. A mural of Jonathan's face had been painted on the side of the building, with the words, "Respect is non-negotiable." A teenager stood to speak. "I saw what Jonathan King did, and I thought, if he can stand in that lobby and not lose his cool, then maybe I can stand in my school and not lose mine." The crowd applauded, some with tears in their eyes. Jonathan himself wrestled with the ripple effects. Alone in his penthouse one evening, he stared out at the skyline. He had wanted accountability. He had demanded reform, but he hadn't expected to become a symbol. Symbols were heavy. He thought of his father again, of lessons taught on stoops and in small churches. When God gives you a bigger stage, son, He's also given you a bigger responsibility. Jonathan whispered to the empty room, "I hear you, Dad." By December, other industries were adopting similar protocols. A major airline announced dignity audits. A hospital chain rolled out anonymous oversight. Even universities began tying administrator bonuses to fairness metrics. Civil rights leaders called it a second wave of corporate accountability. Pundits dubbed it the King effect. But Jonathan knew it was more fragile than that. It wasn't about him. It was about the people who had chosen to act: Naomi, Sophia, David, and the millions who saw themselves in their choices. One snowy evening, Jonathan returned quietly to the Fifth Avenue branch. It had been remodeled, slightly brighter lights, clearer signage, a small plaque near the entrance that read, "This branch was the birthplace of the King Protocol, 2025. Naomi greeted him at the door, nervous but proud. "We've come a long way," she said. Jonathan smiled. "You've come a long way." As he stepped inside, he noticed something different. The air was lighter. The staff warmer, the customers calmer. It was not perfect. Nothing ever was, but it was better. And sometimes better was the first step to great. Snow fell gently over Manhattan, frost in the avenues in white. The year was drawing to a close, but the echoes of 7 minutes in September were still shaping headlines, classrooms, and conversations across the nation. Jonathan King walked slowly along Fifth Avenue toward the Atlas branch that had changed everything. The building shimmered under holiday lights, wreaths hanging above the doors, carolers singing nearby. To passers-by, it looked like any other bank. To Jonathan, it was the site of both humiliation and transformation. He entered quietly, inside. The lobby bustled with customers, but the atmosphere was different, warm, respectful. Staff greeted people with genuine smiles, guiding them with patience instead of suspicion. Jonathan noticed a young black couple at the counter being helped without hesitation, their toddler tugging playfully at his father's coat. He lingered near the wall where a small bronze plaque had been installed. It read, "On this site, the King Protocol was born, a commitment to dignity, accountability, and respect for all." Jonathan touched the plaque lightly, as if sealing it with his own hand. Naomi Brooks appeared from behind the counter. She had grown into her new role with quiet grace, her confidence blooming with each passing week. Today, her hair was tied back neatly, her posture strong. "Mr. King," she said warmly, "I didn't know you were coming." "Neither did I," Jonathan replied with a small smile. "I just wanted to see for myself." Naomi glanced around proudly. "It feels different now. Customers notice it. I notice it. Sometimes it still scares me, the responsibility, but I think I'm starting to believe I belong here." Jonathan nodded. "You don't just belong. You're shaping it." Her eyes glistened. "Thank you for not just seeing me that day, but trusting me afterward." Jonathan's voice softened. "You earned that trust when you chose courage over fear. That choice will carry you far." Across town, Sophia Lane sat in a small cafe, laptop open, answering emails. Her video had become one of the most watched clips of the decade. Networks still called her. Journalists still asked for interviews. But Sophia kept her feet grounded. When a student journalist emailed her for advice, she replied, "Don't chase viral. Chase truth. If the truth is powerful, people will find it." Her life had changed, yes, but she never forgot that day in the lobby, how her hands had trembled while holding the phone, how her instincts told her not to look away. David Ramirez, once a struggling freelancer, was now on contract with a major newspaper. Yet he, too, remembered the roots of it all. He kept the cracked phone he'd used that morning on a shelf above his desk, a reminder that sometimes the smallest tools could tell the biggest truths. In one of his final articles of the year, David wrote, "The King Protocol was not born in a boardroom. It was born in a moment of disrespect, captured by a lens and corrected by courage." We should remember that change often begins not with power, but with persistence. Jonathan returned to his penthouse that evening, the city skyline glowing through the glass walls. He poured a glass of water, sat in his armchair, and allowed himself to breathe. The journey had been exhausting meetings, interviews, audits, reforms, but it had also been clarifying. He had discovered the true weight of leadership, not authority, but accountability. He thought again of his father's words, echoing through memory when they look at you and see less. "You stand taller," Jonathan whispered. I stood taller. Dad, but not just for me, for all of us. Later that night, his phone buzzed. It was a video call from Naomi. On her screen, the branch staff, new hires, diverse and eager, gathered around a small holiday tree in the lobby. "Mr. King," Naomi said, smiling wide, "we wanted you to see this. Our first holiday together under the new standards." Voices chimed in "Merry Christmas," "Mr. King, Happy Holidays." Jonathan chuckled, warmth flooding his chest. "Merry Christmas. Everyone, remember respect is the best gift you can give." The group cheered and the call ended. Jonathan sat back, his heart light. Across America, the ripple continued. Banks copied the King Protocol. Universities taught it in ethics courses. Civil rights leaders cited it in speeches. A new phrase had entered the cultural vocabulary, "pull a king." It meant to respond to injustice with calm, decisive accountability. And in homes everywhere, parents told their children the story of the CEO who was profiled in his own bank, and how he chose not only to fire the guilty, but to build a better system in their place. The snow deepened outside. Jonathan stood by his window, watching the flakes drift down on the city that had both scarred him and lifted him. He smiled faintly. The humiliation of that morning would never leave him, but neither would the triumph that followed. Both were part of his story now, a story not of revenge, but of restoration. He raised his glass softly, as if toasting the unseen millions who had watched, learned, and hoped with him. "To dignity," he whispered, "may we never delay it again." And with that, the story of 7 minutes became a legacy, one that would live far beyond Jonathan King, beyond Atlas, beyond Fifth Avenue, a legacy that said respect is not optional, justice is not negotiable, and hope, once sparked, can light the world. The story of Jonathan King is more than a viral moment. It's a mirror held up to society. At its core, it teaches us that dignity is not something to be negotiated or delayed. It must be protected in the ordinary spaces of life, the teller's window, the waiting room, the checkout line, because those are the places where people's humanity is most vulnerable. For older audiences who have lived through decades of change, this story affirms something deeply familiar. Progress often begins with one person refusing to accept disrespect. Jonathan's choice reminds us that strength can be quiet, calm, and rooted in values learned long before the cameras turn on. The lesson is both practical and personal. We may never stand in a bank as a CEO, but each of us stands in daily moments where we can choose, remain silent in the face of injustice, or take the harder road of accountability. His story shows that when we choose courage, the ripple effects can transform not only one life, but entire institutions. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful journey. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe so more people can hear it. Together, we can keep these conversations alive and keep the hope of dignity and justice moving forward.